everybody? Hope y'all are doing well tonight. Just doing a quick show before bed. Got a zoomed in shot here of the waning gibbous moon. Got a few people in the chat. What up Z Proxy? What up David King and Matt? I think we got YoQ and Randy as well. Let me know if you're out there. Gotta be honest, I'm pretty sleepy, but I took advantage of the clear shot. I'll always go live if I can. What's going on, Cyclic Visuals? How you doing? I'm just admiring the Terminator area along the moon. Really cool formations. It's about 10% in shadow at this point. Have some coffee. Yeah, I thought about brewing some, but at 3 in the morning is probably not a good idea. I think the focus is pretty sharp. I feel like the wiggliness is from the storm that just passed through. In fact, I got some pretty killer lightning shots tonight. Perhaps I'll try and play you guys this clip. Let's see if this thing will work, actually. Sucks. I thought it was going to work, but it didn't. So I tried to copy the clipped file that I did of all the lightning and put it on the memory unit and put it back in the camera and see if it played, but for some reason it wasn't reading it. So I'll just have to upload that to a video on the channel. But it was really, really crazy earlier. Yeah, those are just like thumbnails that couldn't be read. Because normally what I'll do is I'll like format the memory card on the camera and wipe it clean before I do any shows. So when you're transferring it to the computer, it'll kind of have the thumbnails and the pictures and then also the MP4 files, like the 4K stuff. So I transferred all the files and then tried to add the edit that I did of the lightning like backwards. Onto the card and to have it read, but it wasn't reading. That's the sitch. Yeah, so storms, and also it's really humid. So the storms just moved through, some crazy lightning storms, and definitely residual atmospherics. It's gonna happen. Social media is just, I hate to use the word toxic, but just a lot of comments are really annoying. It draws you in, it makes you want to respond. And I got no time to respond. What was I watching? Let's see. I was going through some of the 50th anniversary stuff for Apollo. Not to watch the videos, but to thumbs down and to just read the comments and just see kind of the psychological effect of how many people disagree and how many conspiracy theorists there are. Just kind of gauge the heat metric on those videos. And then I found, what did I find? I found Kronos channel, Kronos. He's doing a lot of interesting videos on Electric Universe. Really deep in it. Yo, what up, Bashar Jade? How's it going? Scent Mark says, you think they really found a base up there? There are two different theories that I consider when I think about the moon and aliens. In general, I don't believe in aliens. the way ufology or ancient aliens present it. And likely every event related to ufology is man-made. I know that's a simple way of putting it, but that's my personal opinion. So, further than that, looking at the moon, considering the distance of the moon and the size, you really can't see buildings or structures or craft or humans or human-sized things. So it's almost impossible to actually see things. And to be perfectly honest, there's so many YouTube channels that pretend they're seeing things when they're really not, and they never really mention how big things really are. So I would be wary about sizing proportions when looking at lunar objects. And yeah, much more likely that there are satellites and or meteors, asteroids, space junk, debris, other objects, but much less likely that there are actually sentient creatures from different galaxies or solar systems. Yeah, definitely no buildings and towers are visible. Ancient megalithic structures sound really interesting, but most of those are on Earth. Anything seen from Earth on different planets or the moon are just pareidolia and interpretive. Richard Hoagland and those cats are really suspicious in terms of, like, that whole line of research goes nowhere. Or at least for me, it stagnated after 12 years of following it. Yeah, Chrono's channel is pretty good, actually. I just started going through a few videos today. YoQ says, man, I can see some beige-like color. Yeah, I boosted the contrast and the saturation a bunch. And you can really see the nice greens and kind of gray blues coming out. I kind of had the settings from last night, actually. They fit rather nicely. Scentmark, you might have been referred here from the Secure Team channel. So, sorry to disappoint. But yeah, I'm really into real footage of space. I'm open to aliens if they show up, but it doesn't seem like really that whole disclosure thing is happening. And I don't want to promote false hope or false identification of objects. So I know there are a lot of channels dedicated to doing that. I don't want to be one of them. I will tell you that, like, with the just very simple optics and physics, that it's almost impossible to see any structures in terms of buildings. Like, pixels are like 3 or 4 kilometers. You know, buildings are like, imagine the size proportion. I mean, it looks amazing and it looks like it's very close, but you know, there are other theories where perhaps the moon's small and very close, but even then, there would be an entirely much more interesting conspiracy there if the moon were small and close versus aliens being the first conspiracy to look into. Oh, nice, David. You're probably getting the moon a bit lower on the horizon. This is up at like 45 degrees, almost due south for me in Florida. Mark and David, if y'all are into like kind of quote-unquote UFO transits and things like that. I have a playlist where I've recorded a bunch of like interesting objects passing the moon, passing near the moon, the ISS, Hubble, and things like that. So if you haven't checked it out before, check out that playlist, or like search my archive for flybys or transits. Like, I'm open to a lot of things, so, but I definitely don't want to push kind of, yeah, I definitely saw aliens, because it's very hard to really prove that. Nice. What's the weather like in Utah right now? It's very clear. Cool. Good deal. Yeah, rolling into 3 a.m. over here. Go for a little bit longer. Maybe check out Saturn for a second. I've been enjoying doing the stream late nights. Feels like the very edge of space. Like nobody in the world is doing this. I wonder if anyone else is. What up, spot on level? Z-Proxy, how many lunar waves do you have on video? I have 2 still left on mine, and one of them was removed, and I decided not to put it back up. And I have the Jupiter wave, if you look at that one. And recently, if you want to see like a very cool flyby, there's a Saturn transit where an object passes right in front of Saturn, and that's kind of crazy. I don't know what that is. Hey, cheers, spot on level. Welcome, and feel free to check out the archives for tons of interesting footage over the years. And same thing, if you want to check out the description, that has all the gear stuff and the music. So I'm running a Celestron Nexstar 8 right now, and Sony Alpha 6500, which is a 4K cam. I have like a very complex rig with the PC and the other computer, but this is the kind of rig I've been using for about 3 years now, and it really does amazing stuff. Mark says, damn man, I hope you didn't answer me about the moon base and I missed it. Yeah, I went off on a whole tangent. I was wondering why you weren't like responding to what I was saying. YoQ, have I ever seen that Nikon P1000? Oh yeah, I have. A buddy of mine has one. It's pretty rad. No, it's all good, man. I was saying in a nutshell that... Let me lower this just a touch more. So yeah, I was saying that that lunar bases, spacecraft, things like that, like pyramids and all the sorts of stuff that Richard Hoagland talks about and the ufology stuff movement talks about, I really don't think you can actually optically or physically see on the moon at the size it really is. So while I leave everything open and on the table, I just don't want to be a channel that kind of promotes that sort of stuff because it's really difficult to prove, and a lot of the stuff is just interpreted or misinterpreted rather. So that's my yeah, I watched everything to do with disclosure up until about 2012, 2013, from David Wilcock to MUFON, you name it. And at some point you realize that it's man-made technology and that we have the capabilities to do that, and we should be working on, you know, getting that technology out. But when it's wrapped up in the story of in the UFO story and ancient aliens, it really loses a ton of credibility. So I had to move away from that. He said I was on the back side of the moon. So the back side of the moon is called the far side, and it's one of those things that really, like, about 5 total pictures exist of the far side of the moon, and a little bit of really awful footage from some of the Russian expeditions. So the idea that anybody could really know about anything on the far side of the moon at all is just very suspect, in my opinion. You know, which is different than the entire Apollo missions and whether people believe that that actually happened correctly or if that was a fake. I want to keep that separate because that really has nothing to do with aliens for me, or other types of conspiracies at all. That thing is completely different. Did I see, let's see, Spot On says, did I catch that eclipse partial? So down here in Florida, like, I'll try and get any type of celestial event that I can, but certain ones aren't visible. So the eclipse wasn't visible for me at all. It was too low on the horizon. I did, however, capture the lunar eclipse in February of this year. And if you just look at my archive, you'll see, like, I've captured Mercury transiting the sun, Venus being occulted by the moon during the day, like in 2015 I caught that, lunar wave, Jupiter wave, ISS, Hubble, you name it. I think I've got like a version of it. It's fair to question why the telemetry data was lost or destroyed for any reason. I think that's a valid question. Thanks for hitting that thumbs up, yo. Appreciate it. So Mark says, it was a witness named Carl Wolf who said he was fixing a piece of equipment that was bottlenecking the production of photographs from the lunar orbiter. So it's one of those things where I decided to do this channel a while ago so that people could really see like live, realistic space footage and stop having to rely on whistleblowers and inside people and government agencies and private organizations. I want to see if like a citizen amateur scientist, or scientist, whatever I am, could actually do astronomy in a realistic and down-to-earth type of way. So over the years, I've moved away from a lot of those types of stories where like it's almost impossible to prove that. You could just hear a story or two stories and think all of a sudden like your imagination takes over, and then you're in this entirely other realm where you're imagining where you're just living in this reality that a few people have created for you, and a conspiracy kind of resonates with that. So I moved away from that. Now, could there be something on the far side of the moon? For sure. But do I trust if somebody saw a photo and then whistle blew and then talked about it? And I can't really tell if that's real or not. If you just read kind of the language and the kind of fear tactics that the language evokes, like terrifying, like, you know, Weather Channel uses this a lot, like terrifying storm or threatening storm. These types of words make people feel scared, but also excited. So it's not just like fear porn is to make you feel scared, but it does actually kick people into gear, and they just want to click on it and find out what happens. So a lot of ufology and conspiracy in general is mired in that type of rhetoric. So I would encourage potentially just rereading some of the sentences that trigger you to want to believe in aliens or whatever, stuff like that. Like, I'm not trying to imply I know what you think, but for me the language is really specific. What up there, Justin T? You know, but like Scent Mark, that whole idea of like an insider who was logging photographs, that's a lot like the Richard C. Hoagland Face on Mars. It's a lot like, what is it, Lloyd Pye, or a couple of these other cats who have the same types of stories where they're like, oh, I was in some sort of backdoor office and they were scrubbing photos. And I used to really buy that stuff a lot, so I'm not trying to judge, but for me, like, man, it just doesn't make sense. Like, it would make much more sense that, you know, we have scientists on Earth who've learned how to harness things like anti-gravity using certain types of plasma physics, and that's been around for about 100 years. And so that makes way more sense. Same thing with crop circles. Same thing with this whole, like, the idea of a prison planet. Like, I don't buy that. I feel like, you know, there are forces that have a lot of power on Earth, but I think the majority of people have more power than that small group. It just takes a while for it to work. Well, if you think about it, Mark says, my issue is, and I'll leave it at this, he said he was willing to testify under oath before Congress, and Congress and the media have dodged the issue. So the very quick of it is the media is completely corrupt and is a mouthpiece for the government, which is a company, and they don't work for you or me. And the Congress is pretty corrupt as well. So even if this guy is willing to testify under oath, it means nothing almost. Not almost, it actually means nothing. And they dodge because they set up that guy, and they just want to incite people to really think that something's happening with disclosure, but nothing's really happening. Same thing with the moon missions. Mixing my music. Yeah, I was keeping it low because I feel like it's difficult to hear me talk. But actually, let me talk about this punch, this Buzz Aldrin, Bart Sibrel punch, because I really think it's such a popular story, and it really bugs me, because you know, I guess I gotta say this, but it's really not cool to punch anybody for any reason, and especially not cool to get punched. So this idea that like people posture, especially online, or like even when people step to one another, you know, claiming that they're going to kick each other's ass, I think it's just one of the most I don't have a word to describe it except for primitive and useless and really just almost fake. If anything is fake, it's posturing between two people who want to punch each other, or one person who wants to punch another, because when they go to bed at night, they can't feel good about their lives because hurting another person is just awful. And the person who got punched has severe post-traumatic stress disorder, and that's just awful too, because we're all basically the same type, you know, we're the same species, and likely we're the same energy force. And I think that's just, you can't denounce or renounce war and crime on one side and then condone abuse on the other. So let's see, and then Aldrin swearing on the Bible. Like, Bart Sobrella is very religious, and, or I don't want to say he's very religious, maybe I'm wrong, but I think he is a Christian, and he feels very strongly about the Bible and about lying. And when I've seen all the interviews, whether or not he talks a lot and people have an opinion of him, he really was out there trying to do this work, and he really had questions about it. So he also, at the same time, could be a shill, whistle, whatever. He could be bought and paid for. But when you really listen to him, you just have to like trust in your gut from people's voices and what they're saying as to whether you buy what they're selling. So anyway, the point is, like, I guess being pushed to a limit, maybe you can react or defend yourself, but the idea that, you know, the astronauts attacked Bart Sobrell because this guy is just like questioning their integrity, it's just a very silly thing. To me, it seems like that's not how you would react if you really went to the moon. You'd just be like, man, you're a joke, of course I went to the moon. But in fact, the fact that they all reacted violently is actually a sign for the opposite. So, those are some thoughts. And yeah, I know that everybody can throw a punch, I can throw a punch, but man, we just gotta get over that sort of behavior. C-Proxy says, swearing on the Bible is like taking an oath not to lie, yet in reality both are just pinky promises. Yeah, of course, it's totally arbitrary. In fact, it would have been so easy had Buzz Aldrin just sworn on the Bible and just ignored the whole thing. It would have never made the headlines. In fact, the fact that it made headlines actually makes it even seem like Bart is not, is a weapon, a propaganda machine. But I don't know, I feel like he could be a real person. But either way. St. Mark is talking about sparring. When you attend sparring for the first time, you find out how well you can fight. It's a private group. So, in the school I attended, they did not let you come to sparring until purple belt level. So, I'm not... It's hard to talk about fighting and not talk about martial arts or training and the kind of the health benefits that gives you. So I'm not against all of that necessarily. I just think at the highest level of martial arts and training, I feel like they teach you not to hit people and not to use your power. So I'm saying at every level that should be the rule. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Because it haunts you, you know? It's almost like self-abuse. Although, like, I'm also certain that that has to exist at some level. So I don't think you can fully eradicate abuse ever, but gotta try. Got to try. Mark says, I've been in situations where it was self-defense and felt fine after. Another that was posturing that advanced to physical altercation did not feel good. Well, self-defense, if you can protect yourself in any circumstance, you know, whether it's catching yourself from falling or protecting yourself from a hit, you know, that's going to happen, and that's something that you can almost never really plan for. I mean, you can train, but you can't really plan for an interaction like that. But I feel like if you're out to bully and out to hurt people, and the first thing that comes to mind when you disagree with somebody is to violently aggress them, then I think we can't really move past that. You know, of course you can do that, but I think it hasn't enough like violence been spread and enough blood been spilled to the point where now we just need to kind of talk about things and smoke something and chill out. I think it's exhausting, the violence. Just tiresome at this point. Yo, what up, fast paced? So talking about 50 years tomorrow. I just been talking about like how the moon, the whole Apollo thing is actually a valid line of questioning, and how it's mired in all this conspiracy and bullshit behavior, but in fact it's well worth talking about. I was constantly, maybe not constantly, I wasn't even shocked actually. It's just one of those things, those psychological exercises, reading through YouTube comments. And so looking at some of the Apollo 50 stuff today just put me on just like, I wanted to respond, and I want to talk about different topics. I just talked about one of them with the whole Buzz Aldrin punching Bart Sibrel thing. Like, I just don't see why people feel the need to comment about Bart Sibrel's harm. You know, they're like, oh, I'm so glad that person was hurt. It's such an odd mentality to write a YouTube comment and then to get thumbs up for it. I don't know what to say to that, except like that's also pretty boring, and it just stalls and hinders us from moving forward. Other things like, you know, saying that Buzz Aldrin is a real man for punching Bart Sibrel, like that's also so stupid and almost homoerotic. the whole, it's almost completely inverted in America, where like men idolize men and then make fun of other men and women and children, basically, when they really just love each other. There's so much of that in the Apollo comments, like especially the Neil Armstrong interviews. They're all like, rest in peace, Neil, you're such a real man. And half the comments are like, you know, that's what a real man is. We've really lost what real men are. And that's just like this really sweeping generalization of so many people on Earth now that are just really good people. It's just a strange mentality to just sweep everybody under the carpet of mediocrity just because they feel it. Yo, what up there, Copper? Thank you. How you doing? What up, Seraphic Presence? Is that the middle section of No Quarter Live? That's a very nice compliment, but no, that's, I'm just playing some of my own music in the background. But I do love Led Zeppelin, so I probably have some influence in there. Spot On says, no one cares about other people's fighting experiences, it's egotistic. Well, I think, like I was saying, this whole idea of being, it's primitive and it's boring and it's useless, like it doesn't allow us to move forward. I think people have indulged in violence and criminality and murder and all this stuff. Like, I think that's so tiresome at this point. It would be great to just all get on the same page about, like, a new paradigm in physics, to get into space, to talk to one another, to learn things. It's so much more exciting than violence. Set Mark says, you don't just feel bad if someone gets hurt because of you. You're at home waiting for the cops to come and arrest you. Not a good feeling. Or, like, I grew up in a third world country, and personally, and you were waiting for the other gang and his brothers and his cousins to come and beat you up if you, like, kicked somebody's ass. Like, it never ends. That's why self-defense is always last resort, and hopefully you can defend yourself. But anything beyond that, you're just asking for your life to be mired in this sort of shit. And, like, what a waste. Now, granted, if you're making a ton of money in MMA, and that's your thing, like, I can't complain or judge you, but, like, I'm more talking about really, like, YouTube comments who posture. And I think a lot of it is not just bots, but people who are paid to comment. I'm a huge fan of, like, finding these channels that have no content, yet they're constantly, like, stirring up shit in YouTube comments. So I feel like either YouTube hires them or other agencies hire them to really screw up the conversation about science and everything else, but for me, science. Yeah, like, I practice this meditation of not replying to comments that really trigger me. Like, that's my willpower practice. Not getting angry at people, internalizing and or turning that into either music or streaming. And I think we all have a lot of anger and a lot of distrust. But I think the only way to really get past that is to actually work through it versus engage in like that retaliatory feeling. Yeah, keyboard warriors they're called, but really more so it's like people who are very emotionally tied to concepts and theories like that. Like, right now I think, I just talk into the ether, and there are people in the chat, like, who might be the people who I'm referencing. I don't know, I'm trying not to piss anyone off, but I definitely have spent my fair share of time on YouTube, and it's a great place to learn, and it's a great place to hang out with people in small circles and exchange ideas, so... Z-Proxy is definitely a bot. Spot on, you're talking about all the Van Allen radiation belts, and there's no space travel and stuff like that. So, my quick opinion on that is that those are a lot of ideas all thrown into one. So there are things like scalar wave technology and plasma ion engines. Space travel as presented in the public pop science sector is very misleading. So before believing that all space travel is out of the question, I urge you to research things like Eric P. Dollard, Theoria Apophysis, and just a few channels that talk about like plasma technology. This stuff is possible, and that's why I think that space travel might be possible. However, at the same time, things like the Van Allen radiation belt is something that's very difficult to prove one way or another or talk about within the Apollo discussion. So whether or not it's 100% true that it was deadly, it's something that I've seen absolutely goes nowhere in terms of the debate. It's the same thing with the flag waving. It's the same thing with the what else? The heat on the surface with the AC, the pressure in the suits. The real big standout is that it just is not happening today. It just seems almost impossible technologically for the public science sector to actually get to the moon or outside of Earth. So there's that. But maybe it's happening in the private sector, and we don't know. So that you've got to leave options open. If that happens, that's part of the emotional, getting the emotional out of these types of concepts and addressing it just in terms of experimental and observational. What up there, Authentic Max? How am I doing? I'm doing all right. A little tired, but okay. There's a full moon a few days ago in Asia. As I was watching, a strange thing happened. The moon dimmed at times and brightened again, and it kept happening. Any idea? Well, typically when I see stuff like that, it's because of very thin layers in the atmosphere, and possibly like maybe smog. In LA it did that a bit, and it definitely used to do that up north. Down here, you know, like you see the, like, because I have the camera settings, I kind of blast out the clouds, but I would say it's because of atmospherics. Yeah. Oh, so you got that reptilian stuff going? That, you know, I've talked about that actually on recent shows because I don't know why it comes up all the time, but the whole David Icke, Black Cube, Saturn, Matrix, Moon, Amplifier, Reptilian, Royal Family, all that stuff. I think it's really such a distraction from what is really on the table, which is a new type of astrophysics, a new type of science that has high-level technology implications and extremely high-level historical implications. So I think while it's fun to dabble in the reptilian mythos, it kind of also goes nowhere. It's like disclosure. So there are human-animal, human-reptile hybrids that drink children's blood in ritualistic ceremonies. Then what? You're gonna go raid them, or, you know, stream them live? Like, we've gotten to a place where people actively give their faces away and would be excited if the queen was a reptile. So yo, peace out, spot on level. Oh, maybe I'll catch you on another stream. Happy to chat. Reptilian, I don't know. Maybe I wasn't. I didn't mean to judge, but yeah. All right, I got you. Sorry, I went right into that. Alright, I'm going to stretch my legs, and maybe I'll pull up some Saturn for us real quick. You're asking me to put new tunes on, or if this is a new tune. Ashara, you're right. It's just really hard to find any evidence for things like that. And mostly why, like, when I talk about space, I really try and talk about it from the perspective of everything that I've seen and have mostly streamed pretty much everything that I've seen. So all the footage of Jupiter and Saturn, and stars and deep sky and transits and the moon, when you put that next to all the conspiracies, it really starts to weed everything out. Authentic Max, and I was wondering if you know the first astronauts who went to the moon said the color of the soil there was, whether the astronauts said the color of the soil was gray or brownish. So I think I can remember Buzz talking about like the grains and like how soft the soil was, and I think Neil mentions that it was like, or Michael Collins mentions it. I don't know. I've always thought that they were some strange cats. It's pretty blasphemous to say anything about Neil, Buzz, or any of those guys, but I understand why people question it, because those press conferences and their interviews and their lives post these moon missions were incredibly suspicious. And not like in the creepy, spooky way, just in the, like, it just doesn't seem like it all makes sense. Reptilian, I'm reading your story too. Let's see. Ashar, you're talking about David Wilcock, and or is that something different? Wilcox and the Blue Chickens. It's making me think of David Wilcock and the Blue Aliens. So Saturn is a little out of my view right now, so I think I'm going to just stick with the moon for a few more, and maybe like 5 more, 10 more. And then I'm gonna head to bed. It's closing on 4. I'm waiting to see where these stories go. 20 years later, I had a bad flashback to the situation. So do you still have the pea-sized object under your skin? I mean, I don't want to judge the story because I don't know much about it, but I think we have such an interesting existence as humans that everything like that, I've had experiences, like crazy experiences like that, but not exactly like that, but definitely a lot of PTSD, and I feel like that all falls under the purvey of the consciousness that we understand. It's not insignificant, but I don't feel like it's alien or, I don't know, or hybrid, human hybrid, genetic, ancient alien stuff. I don't know, I've just gotten so far away from that, and it feels much more like our ancestors had the power of electrostatic energy, scalar wave technology, and it basically looks like magic. And you can do all sorts of crazy shit with it. And I feel like that's where we should be going. Oh, right, I was talking about the color of the moon's surface. So I feel like they talk about the moon in ways that bother me because they don't really mention detail in ways that I would imagine that if you went to the moon, you'd mention all this really specific detail, especially when they're pressed on it in certain interviews. So if you go and look at the astronauts being interviewed by different over the years, just look for detail, like names of craters, colors, distance, specific star formations, specific references to the sun, specific references to radiation. You'll find very little of that information. Now, you'll find some of it in books, but not that much either. You know, a side reference here or there. Most of it is anecdotal, good old boy type Americana, and the interviews are the same type of interviews that they give when they're invading countries and selling you a bank bailout or a candidate for an election. That's my opinion. So it's very hard to discern whether that whole thing was real or fake, or to prove it one way or another. But so how do you say, like colored photos from the moon had a certain color without engaging in whether those pictures are actually taken on Earth? Ashara says, why would they need to use physical matter like metal if they were advanced? It seems crude. Yeah, I think that's a great point about ufology, which is absolutely true. I've always thought the idea that aliens are kind of imprisoning Earthlings because we're bad, so silly, or that aliens would semi-mess with us, like they'd sometimes be cloaking or camo, and sometimes they wouldn't, so that people would see them, but then they wouldn't be believed. It's almost like I don't know, it's just like an abusive type of situation that happens in real life, but with the situation that humans suck, and there's a government that is fucking with humans, and then on top of it you have aliens that are flying around watching all of this and not saving regular people, or just saving some people, or communicating with just some people, like Drunvalo Melchizedek. But the truth is, it's like everybody has just as much power as the next person, and what separates people right now is critical thinking, intelligence, practice, and then the other side of it is very high-level technology, which separates a small group of people from 99% of the rest of us. But it seems like the Earth is made of all these quests, so there's always another quest coming up. So I You know, maybe the quest now is to just figure out what the next steps are. What up there, Hazmat? Proof needs the scientific method applied. Is that a quote from somewhere that I don't remember? The Carl Sagan thing? I don't know, but while I'm going off on my rants, I feel like things like that too, like where you're questioning a government agency, but then you use their data as a reference point. You know what I mean? Like, people always question NASA, or like I see questions about NASA, and they're like, those pictures that you took at Saturn, they didn't show blah, blah, blah. So you're like semi-believing them and you're completely enraged, or whatever, you're indignant about their results. And I feel that too, but the flip side is that I'm like really trying desperately to replace NASA footage with real moon footage. So I think that's the only thing where I'm like, the only thing we can really do is to just replace bad data. There's just no way in hell that NASA gives a crap what anyone thinks at this point. Nor will they probably ever tell humankind or the public about the Apollo truth. Probably won't happen. Seraphic Present says, you ever look for the so-called shard on the moon's surface? So I talked about it a little earlier on the show, but that whole kind of crystal palaces, crystal shards, bases, all the Richard Hoagland stuff. I was very deep into that, and I thought it might be a possibility, but what you realize is that Richard Hoagland is there to create, is to divide people in two ways. One, he's a very believable, earnest type of guy, but the data that and in fact, a lot of these people like David Wilcock and Stephen Greer and Richard C. Hoagland, maybe they don't even know that they're being handled, but they are definitely being handled. So Richard Hoagland puts forth this idea that the moon missions were real, but when they got to the moon, there were aliens, or there were crystal palaces, or ancient races of aliens. All those ideas are so that History Channel can sell more advertising, and so that the government makes people feel like there are aliens out there that are going to save them, in order so people just feel really helpless. When in fact, there's no way you can validate pictures from the moon ourselves. Even the Apollo stuff, when you look at it, we don't have any type of real metric besides being a photographer to say these are real or not real. And then further than that, bringing out curves and levels in the background to see the crystal shards, these huge types of citadel type objects or buildings that were left on the surface of the moon. I don't know, that's almost impossible to prove. So it's a nice fantasy, but it's not something that we could see from Earth. And two, I almost can't believe that something like that would exist on the surface of the moon, because it would just be obliterated within, I don't know, months. Yeah, I mean, it really seems like the government wants people to believe in aliens, so the first thing I'll do is not believe in aliens. I know it's really simplistic, but I'm telling you, once you get that out of your system, science becomes a lot more fun. There's just so much out there in terms of plasma cosmology and interaction between planets and objects, and what happens too is not only do you answer a lot of questions, but then a lot of conspiracies almost become answered through plasma cosmology. Yeah. What up there, Tom? How's it going? Hazmat, do I think the lunar waves are just the digital equipment? I can tell you I've been in tech for 20 years, and I've been filming. I've filmed at least 1,000 times, and I've caught 3 lunar waves. And I can, you know, for what it's worth, I'm almost 100% certain that it has nothing to do with the telescope, the camera, or the computer. Mostly because it's at a diagonal, and there's no reason for it to be at a diagonal, because the Bayer matrix on a camera and the interlaced system on a screen are always arranged perpendicular at 90-degree angles in a grid, or in a hexagonal honeycomb pattern. Nothing will go on a diagonal, especially not at a 35 or 65-degree diagonal. And the other one is airplane trails. I've filmed so many airplane trails that have turbulent vortices, and the lunar wave is a very precise, very fine line that looks like a scan line. I understand why people think it's a hologram, but the moon certainly doesn't look like a hologram. So there's a lunar wave situation, and I actually think it has to do probably with the double sheath of the plasma layer around Earth or the moon interacting with one another, creating like a very quick passing through a double layer. That's my best guess at this point. Alright, so let me know if you have any other thoughts. I'm going to start calling it right here. Appreciate everybody hanging out with me on this late show. It's a Friday night. Probably lost. Yeah. It's all good. I get to rest tomorrow. Sheath. Sometimes the sheath is not close together, and sometimes it's close, so you get either the two rapid passing, or sometimes you'll get like one, and then maybe like 10 seconds later you get the second one. So if you look at my Jupiter wave video, and then John McKeon, which I link in my Jupiter wave video, the other guy who caught it before me, look at his, and he has like a massive gap in time between the two waves. Same thing, look at like Crow's. Crow and them had a roundtable about the waves recently, and I didn't really listen to it in depth, but you can kind of do the timing on it, and you'll see that there's this kind of idea like that the plasma sheath will vary. So that's how you have the different time signatures between these two waves. But they're so fine and so identifiable as this particular event that I feel like it's just literally like two magnetic plasma sheets interacting quickly. So you get this kind of ripple. And it can happen with any planet or object, basically. Yeah, right? Test. Yo, let me know if you can hear me. I'm going to use the headset microphone. It's got no reverb, dry signal, but I think my pedal board just died. Even though it shouldn't die, it's plugged in 100%. But let me know if you can hear me. I forgot where I left off, but I was talking about, oh right, I was talking about the lunar wave. Yeah, give me a shout in the chat, let me know if you can hear me. Oh, too loud, sorry. How about now, guys? What about now? Sorry, it's just... Damn. Okay, anyway, I was gonna kind of close out the show. If this is a little bit better, let me know. Cool. Yeah, so I was saying that the lunar wave thing is due to this kind of plasma sheet, like a quick snap through of two magnetic layers, and yeah, and the periodicity between them is due to the fact that plasma sheets can extend and the double layers can expand and contract. And so if you look at my Jupiter wave video and then you look at John McKeon's Jupiter wave video, which is linked in my video, you'll see the kind of periodicity between them, and it varies. Yeah, I know there's a major 30-second lag. All good. So that's what I was talking about with the lunar wave, and I think you made it. I'm sure I was talking earlier about, like, I heard myself, but anyway, let me know if you missed it, but that's my thought. The thing about, I think, alien encounters and seeing UFOs and stuff like that, and even disclosure, it's like, I feel like disclosure one is a mixed bag, because do you want to know if aliens exist, or if they've met with humans, or do you want the technology? And I feel like the technology part, that is like pure plasma science. And so once you kind of get away from like alien autopsies, Area 51, Rendlesham, Phoenix Lights, etc., go down that list, you realize that like you're left with like, no, we want this technology. We want like a free space program to really live it. So typically, like a planet, or honestly, I think any living object has this plasma layer around it, and its plasma layers are always in double sheaths, like two skins basically, and these are probably just pressure-mediated skins. And so I think the Earth has a skin and the Moon does, and they kind of interact. And probably the same thing, like Jupiter has like a massive magnetic influence, and like do we really know if the Earth and Jupiter possibly interact? I mean, maybe that's one of the lines of questioning. So I definitely recommend like looking in the description of my videos, or go to Thunderbolt's project and just research some of the videos that talk about plasma bubbles and sheaths and how planets grow on filaments. And I feel like that might explain the whole lunar wave phenomenon, but it's just my best guess at this point. I might have mentioned it earlier, but if it cut out, I was saying that it's definitely not due to technology, in my opinion. And I'm 50% or 60% certain it's not airplane trails. Actually, let's say 80 to 90%, because I just feel like the lunar wave or whatever, Jupiter wave, never really has any vorticity. It's not spiraling. It comes down very, very sharp, almost like a scan line. Authentic Max says, could the moon wave be right when an asteroid or meteorite hits the far side of the moon and creates like a wave? Well, I have a Jupiter wave, so that's hard. I think it's probably due to something in the Earth's atmosphere. That's my guess. Hazmat says, I want to enjoy life without 8 hours a day being taken away. Well, the philosophical answer to that is that you couldn't really have enjoyment without work. So it's almost like the give and take of life mandates pain and suffering in order to have joy and excitement. Yo, American Life Videos H, sup, driving home to catch a stream along the way. Alright y'all, I'm fading pretty hard right now. I gotta put away the equipment. I hope y'all have an excellent Saturday. This is a cool, quick 1.5 hour late night stream. We got some moonage, some nice clear moonage of the waning gibbous kind. A dreamy stream for all moonkind. This is your captain signing out for tonight. Closing shots of our moon. And I'll catch you real soon, everybody. Thanks, Max. Thanks, Reptilian Research Redux. Thanks, Hazmat. Thanks, American Life. Ashara, Tom. Always great to see y'all. Z-Proxy. Stop being a bot. And record shit in 360, bruh. What can I say? And Spot on Level. Alright. And all my regulars who catch this tomorrow. Have an excellent weekend, y'all. Peace.